Every city has its secrets, whispers that slip through alleyways when the lights go out. In this city, the oldest secret is a question. A simple question, asked in the dead of night. It is not a question born of curiosity. It is a trap. A test with no correct answer. The legend says she was a woman, wronged by a cruel world. But the thing that walks the fog now is no longer a woman. It is the question itself. It is the fear of what lies behind the mask. Her name is forgotten. Now, they only call her Kuchisake-Onna. And when the mist grows thick and the streets fall silent, she begins her hunt. Kenji believed in the tangible, in the logic of cells under a microscope, in facts that could be written down and proven. To him, the stories were just that, stories. Tales of a slit-mouthed woman were merely relics, used to frighten children into coming home before dark. He saw the world as a puzzle that could be solved. He did not know that some pieces are shaped like scissors. As he closed his textbook, the world outside the lab window was already changing. A pale fog was creeping through the streets, softening the hard edges of the city, blurring the line between the real and the imagined. It was a night for secrets. And Kenji, armed with nothing but his rationality, was about to learn the oldest one of all. Kenji stepped out from the sterile silence of the university into a world transformed. The city had been erased, replaced by a shifting, yellow-gray void. Neon signs from storefronts bled into the mist, becoming shapeless halos of color. His footsteps, once sharp on the pavement, were now swallowed by the damp air. The familiar sounds of the city, the distant traffic, the hum of life, were muted, as if heard from the bottom of a deep well. This was no longer the city he knew. It was a labyrinth of shadows, where every shape could be a street lamp, and every shadow could be a woman standing perfectly still. He pulled his coat tighter, a futile gesture against a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. He was alone. Or so he desperately needed to believe. Under the sickly glow of a flickering street lamp, she materialized. Not from a side street, but from the fog itself, as if the mist had coalesced into a tall, slender form. A trench coat, a hat shadowing her eyes, and stark against her face, a white surgical mask. She stood motionless, blocking the center of the narrow path. Kenji's steps faltered. His mind raced for a rational explanation, a lost woman, a late-night pedestrian, but his blood had already turned to ice. He moved to step around her. In a glide devoid of any human gait, she shifted, once more blocking his path. Her head tilted, just slightly. And then, the question. A voice devoid of warmth, flat and measured, cutting through the silence. Watashi wa kirai? Am I beautiful? The words hung in the air, simple and absurd. But the stillness of the figure, the emptiness of the streets, turned absurdity into a profound and chilling dread. Every instinct in his rational mind shattered. This was no longer a puzzle. It was a predator. A reflexive, panicked courtesy seized him. "Hi," he stammered. "Yes, you are beautiful." For a moment, nothing. Then, a slow, deliberate movement. Her hands rose to the sides of the white mask. There was no fumbling, only a terrible precision. The mask came away. Where there should have been a mouth was a horror. A grin that stretched from ear to ear, a grotesque gash lined with stitch marks like a discarded doll. It was a wound that mocked the very concept of a smile. Kenji's breath caught in his throat. A small, strangled sound escaped him. The thing that was once a woman took a slow step forward, the scissors in her hand catching the dim light. "How about now?" she whispered, the words slithering from the horrific grin. Rationality was a distant memory. There was only the animal need to flee. Kenji stumbled backward, his legs finally obeying the primal scream in his mind, and he turned and ran into the swallowing fog. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum echoing in the silent maze of alleyways. The world was a blur of wet brick and shifting shadows. Then, a beacon, the sterile, electric glow of a 24-hour convenience store. He burst through the glass door, the electronic chime a jarringly cheerful sound. He leaned against a rack of magazines, gasping, the fluorescent lights feeling like an antiseptic bath. Safety. Civilization. He fumbled for his phone. No signal. The screen displayed a mocking, empty triangle. He looked to the cashier, a bored teenager with headphones on, oblivious. And then he saw her. Through the glass door, standing directly across the street. She wasn't running. She wasn't even looking at the store. She was simply facing it, perfectly still, a tall, dark sentinel in the mist. Waiting. The modern world was not a sanctuary. It was a fishbowl. And he was the fish, being watched. The electronic chime of the door sounded like a death knell as Kenji fled the convenience store. The cashier's bored glance had confirmed it. He was invisible, utterly alone in this nightmare.
Hey, if you're enjoying this story, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss the next story.
He plunged back into the fog. The image of her standing sentinel across the street burned onto his mind. He ran without direction, turning corners at random, his breath ragged. The towering, anonymous backs of buildings loomed over him. He found a sliver of space between two dumpsters in a narrow service alley and squeezed himself into the shadows, the stench of rot and cold concrete filling his lungs. Here, in the crushing silence, the panic began to crystallize into a desperate, fractured logic. The legends. The playground whispers and internet forums he'd once dismissed. Distract her. Throw money. Say, average. The words were absurd, the cheat codes to a game where losing meant a smile carved into your face. He fumbled in his pocket, his fingers closing around a few cold coins. A pathetic weapon. But in the absence of hope, even a superstition felt like a plan. The slow, measured click of heels on pavement echoed down the alley. Not a run, but an inevitable approach. Each click tightened a vice around Kenji's chest. She appeared at the alley's entrance, a tall silhouette against the fog-diffused streetlight. She glided forward, the scissors in her hand catching a sliver of light. This was it. As she paused a few feet away, Kenji's arm shot out, flinging the jingling coins onto the wet ground between them. Futsu, he choked out. Average. You're average. The creature went perfectly still. Her head tilted. The alley was silent save for the drip of water. 4-3 agonizing heartbeats. It seemed the childish legend had held true. Then, a low, wet sound rattled from the horrific grin. It was not a laugh of humor, but of grotesque amusement. The sound of stitches straining. The bargain was rejected. The game was not over. The clicking heels resumed, closer now, and the question slithered through the dark. Am I beautiful? He ran. The coins clattered uselessly behind him, the echo of her rattling laugh chasing him through the fog. But the city itself had turned against him. A familiar street he'd taken 1,000 times now ended in a chain-link fence that shouldn't have been there. A left turn that should have led to a main thoroughfare instead opened onto a deserted, dead-end courtyard. The geometry of his world had become fluid, treacherous. Every shadow pooled into her slender form. Every distant street lamp became the glow illuminating her mask. He was not a man running through a city anymore. He was a rat in a maze, and the walls were closing in. Each desperate sprint did not lead to escape, but only back to the center of the nightmare. She was the only fixed point, the heart of the labyrinth, and he was spiraling inexorably toward her. His lungs burned, each breath a ragged gasp of frigid air. The alley was a dead end. High walls, slick with moisture, rose on 3 sides. A single, flickering light above a rusted metal door cast long, dancing shadows. The clicking heels stopped. He turned. She stood at the mouth of the alley, blocking the only exit. The fog swirled around her trench coat. There was no rush, no anger, only a terrible, patient certainty. She took one slow step forward, then another, closing the distance with the grace of a predator that knows its prey is exhausted. The scissors glinted, a cold, sharp star in the gloom. She stopped an arm's length away. The stench of old blood and damp earth filled the space between them. The question came again, softer now, almost intimate. Am I beautiful? There were no more alleys to run down, no more tricks to play. The coin of superstition had been spent, and it had bought him nothing but these final seconds. Kenji looked at the horrific grin, the dark, empty eyes above it. He saw the truth. There was no correct answer. There was only the question, eternal and hungry. His body sagged against the cold brick wall. The fight drained from him, replaced by a weary, chilling acceptance. A strange calm settled over him. He would not give her the satisfaction of a scream. He met her gaze and offered the only thing he had left, the truth, stripped of all hope. Yes, he whispered, his voice steady. You are perfect. A final, terrible smile seemed to deepen the gash on her face. The scissors lifted. Not in anger, but in ceremony. The city held its breath. And then, the silence was no longer silent. The first gray light of dawn crept into the alley, timid and cold. It illuminated the empty space where Kenji had made his final stand. The only sign that anything had transpired was a single, pristine pair of medical scissors, lying neatly on the wet pavement as if placed there with care. The fog began to thin, retreating into the sewers and shadows from whence it came. The distant sounds of the city waking up, a car starting, a distant siren, filtered back into the world. The city stretched and went about its business. Another night was over. But the question remained, hanging in the air, waiting for the next lonely soul to answer. Or to try. Weeks passed. The official report listed Kenji as a missing person. A sad case of a student who simply walked away from his life. But on certain nights, when the fog rolls in thick and heavy from the river, the old-timers in the neighborhood lock their doors a little earlier. They notice a new quality to the silence, a watchful, waiting stillness. And some claim that if you listen very, very closely, you can hear more than just a single woman's weeping. You can hear a second, softer sound underneath it. The faint, rhythmic whisper of scissors opening and closing. Opening and closing. As if the legend is practicing. Refining its question for the next encounter. The story was over for Kenji. But for the city, the hunt had simply become a little more polished. A little more patient.
That's the end of today's tale. If you liked it, tap that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you'll be the first to hear the next dark story I uncover.